Hello there, BookTube. My name is Daniel. Welcome back to my channel, Guilty Feet. I've got no rhythm. Been a long week, so I'm just going to do a quick Friday reads and then upload this. First book that I finished this week was The Dutch House by Patchett. This is my second Patchett. I read Bel Canto previously, which I quite liked, and I like this as well. Two young children are left by their mother, left behind in this giant folly of a home, the Dutch house, to live with their father, and this damages them, and they carry that damage with them throughout their lives, and all centered around this house and what it means to them. It's a giant metaphor for something or other, which was okay. I didn't, it wasn't my favourite aspect of it. I thought the character work was great, and enjoyed this, and I think cried at the right times as well. One of my least favourite aspects of sort of family sagas that take place over time is that they take place over time, that time passes, and a terrible event that happened in the past can never return to that point. Even when things are resolved, even when the pain and the damage that has been done by their mother disappearing when they were young, some point of that is addressed and resolved, and yet you can never go back and recapture what was lost. And that kind of thing always gives me like a little knot in my stomach, because it's so fictional. Not that you can go back in real life, but this idea that something happens and then jump forward 5 years, and then 10 years later he was this, and then he had a family, and then qualified and did this job and made his first million. It's like all these things happen, and they're just plot to get you to the point where that original damage is addressed and closure is achieved. So it's not my favourite device, because all I regret is missing those years and not being able to solve it and redeem the initial starting point of sadness. But this was nicely done, and it was a good read, and I would definitely recommend it to people. But I just had that knot throughout the reading, but good. After that, I read the second in a series of American spy novels. The first one, which I read a couple of years ago, was called The Mueller Dossier by Charles McCary, and I guess I came to this because I was probably searching for classic spy novels. And I've only read one, John le Carré, the very first Smiley, but I haven't read the whole of that kind of thing. And this is an American version. This was good and wordy. It's not, this is not James Bond. People aren't running around and punching things or blowing up things or driving cars or jumping out of airplanes. It's not that kind of spy stuff. This is sort of old school spy craft, post Second World War and Cold War kind of spy craft stuff. Anyway, that was the first one, was the Mueller Dossier, and I had gone out soon after this and ordered the second one, which is what I read, which is the second in the series, and they feature a spy called Paul Christopher, whose cover is that he's a journalist, but really he works for the American government. And this is the second one. It's called The Tears of Autumn, and that's The Tears of Autumn. The title is a translation of a code name given, we discover, to not a person. The name is a Vietnamese name, but it refers to not a specific person, but it's a code name for an event that happened. And in this book, which takes place, it starts in late 1963 and goes through to the end of 1963 and into 1964. And if you are a student of history, you will know what happened in late November 1963, the assassination of John F. Kennedy, American president. And this story, our spy, Paul Christopher, kind of works out who killed Kennedy, or not who killed Kennedy, but why Kennedy was killed, who put Oswald on in the book depository building, and who paid Jack Ruby to off Oswald, and it makes a pretty good case for solving it, and it's not simple. He has an idea, and he has to go off piste, and leave behind all the security of working for the American government, because it's not in their interest in this story for the truth to come out. So Paul Christopher is a dogged man who chases down a lead and won't stop until he gets the whole truth, and gets in a lot of scrapes and trouble with everyone not wanting him to find out the truth. And it was kind of rompy and fun. I think, a little more actiony than the first one, which seemed very wordy. There is some wordiness and thought in this. There's also some torture and some caper and some plottiness, and a bit of romance as well. In that the one thing that tethers him to reality is a relationship that he forms, and then the threat to that relationship. Yeah, this was really quite good, and I mentioned this to Carrie at Very Literary Carrie, because I know she's an absolute JFK nut, and I don't know if she reads fiction about Kennedy. I know she's read practically every bit of non-fiction that's been written about President Kennedy, but this might be interesting as a general idea of a plausible theory. It was good. And after that, I've read. I'm reading this. This is a book by. I guess you'll read that as S.Y. Agnon. S.Y. is Shmuel Yosef Agnon. So in Hebrew, he's not known as S.Y. Agnon. Shmuel Yosef is put together as a sort of mnemonic. So he's known as Shai Agnon. And this was Israel's first ever Nobel Prize winner, won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1966, and just after he was awarded the Nobel Prize, this edition of two of his stories were put out under the name Two Tales, and it includes two stories that he wrote at different times. One is called The Betrothed, which is the one I finished, and the second is called Ido and Enam, which is the one I just started. And to my shame, I've never read any Agnon, even though my brother used to live on a street named after him. There are streets in every city in Israel named after Shai Agnon. He's read, I think all my children probably studied him in school. When they do Hebrew literature, he's Israel's probably most famous and prominent literary figure. He died in 1970, born in Eastern Europe, moved to Israel at the early part of the 20th century, very early, sort of 1908, I think he came to Israel. So this is pre the existence of Israel, pre the British mandate in Israel. He was here during when the Ottomans ruled the place. And the first story, The Betrothed, the one I've read, is set in about 1912, 1913, so before the First World War, in Jaffa, which was just eye-opening for me to hear a story of Jews living in Jaffa pre the British mandate, and the community they had, and this, it's about a professor in a school, and there's a lot of the people at the time speak Russian, some people from Eastern Europe, there's some German speakers, and they speak Hebrew, the modern Hebrew as we know it now was a language that was just being established. Modern Hebrew is based on classical Hebrew. It was only at the beginning of the 20th century that modern Hebrew became developed as a modern language, and a fresh grammar was built and people started using it. So it's absolutely fascinating to me to see described a society then that seems wholly modern and pre-First World War, and in what would then it was part of the Ottoman Empire, Palestine and part of the Ottoman Empire. It's a really fascinating portrait, and then also the story itself, The Betrothed, is a weird and wonderful story about a professor, Jacob Rechnitz, and the women who I think the six maidens who sort of follow him around, hoping to grab his attention, and their rivalry, and then the visit of a childhood friend. In this copy. This is an old Penguin modern classic that was issued, I think, 1966, after he won the Nobel Prize. This was put out as an example of his writing, one of the earliest translations into English, and this was translated from the Hebrew by Walter Lever, and the old friend who's visiting from Eastern Europe is in this book is rendered as Susan. Of course, in the original Hebrew, it was Shoshana. Susan is a very non-biblical Hebrew name. She's actually Shoshana, and all the local girls that he interacts with all have sort of lovely modern Hebrew names. There's a Tamara and an Osnat, and it's sort of quite pastoral and lovely, but it's also deeply metaphorical, and a lot of allusions to the Song of Songs, Shir HaShirim, and some biblical references, but a sort of very gentle story of how this young man reconciles his childhood love, to whom he committed himself as a child, and now come to sort of fulfill and take this position as his betrothed, and all the women that he has been involved with, not sexually, it's all wonderfully innocent, but the women that he has known and befriended in his time in Israel. It was quite wonderful. That was just, it was a 100-page novella, and now I've just started the second one, but I very much enjoyed this, my first experience with Shah Agnon in translation, and I'm enjoying that very much, and I'll probably finish that tomorrow evening before I go to bed. And then I think the next thing we'll start after that is the copy of Gingerbread by Helen Oyeyemi that I got from Cindy, so I'll be doing that over the weekend, and if I get through that. This is nice big print. Another one of these sort of airport editions. Brian from Bookish had noted that my copy of The Dutch House was enormous, and this is same size. One of these sort of paperback editions that you get at an airport, so they charge you less than paperback prices, but it's still giant and so nice big print. So after I finish the second Shah Agnon story, I've got Gingerbread by Helen Oyeyemi, and then whatever else I can find on the shelf, because it's looking now, finally, that I am going to London on the 3rd of June. So I have another 2 weeks. So the last things I'll be finishing off my TBR before I pop over to London to see my mum, and then hopefully also, all being well, she's going to fly back with me and visit us here in Israel. She hasn't seen her grandchildren here for too long. So that's happening, I think, finally, after every single one of my flights. I was on a charter airline and kept getting cancelled. I finally booked on a sort of major carrier, so there's a little more certainty, assuming the airports are open and nothing terrible happens. So I'm hoping I'm going to be in London on June 3rd, 2 weeks today. That means I'm flying, so fingers crossed. So, but this period of not buying new books, even though I got a couple from Cindy and here and there, did a little haul, has been hugely rewarding, and the fact that I've gone through so many books on my TBR and really whittled that down has been great. But I just bought some more books today from eBay and sent them to my mum's, so there could well be upwards of like 120, 130 books, which is at least a year's worth of reading. So stay tuned. Countdown is 2 weeks to the biggest book haul ever, and unboxing and everything. My mum's left everything in envelopes, so we're going to have a blast, and hopefully I'll film that. I don't know how long it's going to take or what it's going to look like, but the countdown, the final countdown. This is the trip. I put my first video up on December 24th, which was the date I was supposed to be flying. So that same ticket has got rolled over and rolled over and rolled over as they cancel each flight. Now, 6 months later, I may finally be going June the 3rd, but I know I've said it before. So anyway, enough of that. That's my reading, what I've done, what I'm going to be doing, and I'll tell you more next week. Take care, bye.